Happy Turkey Day, everyone! And I figured in its honor, we'd check out our own turkeys. Because, I haven't heard that term used in a little while, but movies that are, well, not good are often referred to as turkeys. So I'm celebrating those. Some of the worst movies of all time. And I've done a couple of other videos with this theme. And I'm going back to that well, because what I've done is I've taken the two most comprehensive film websites, IMDb and Letterboxd, and I've looked at their lowest ranked horror movies. IMDb ranks it out of 10 and Letterboxd out of 5. And I've taken those two scores and combined them to find the worst of the worst. See if there's a movie with a good ranking on IMDb and a bad one on Letterboxd, it can escape this list. But oh no, I went one step further. So some of these are the worst that both have to offer. Number 10. Our first entry on this list didn't fare too bad, and it's possibly the most notorious on here, since it's Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey. If you grew up with these classic characters, or I guess if you didn't, the opening of the film gives us a sort of a recap of who they are, and say that Christopher Robin grew up, and that Pooh, Eeyore, Piglet, and the crew became alone and bitter and cannibalistic, swearing revenge against Christopher Robin. Cut to 5 years later, an adult Christopher returns to 100 Acre Wood along with his new wife and go on the search for his old friends. They find everything much darker than they remember, and Piglet appears and strangles Mary to death, and then Pooh arrives and they drag him off. We're then introduced to a group of friends who all rent a house in 100 Acre Wood for Maria to get over a weird stalker situation. Meanwhile, another of their friends is attacked by Pooh in the woods, and he kills her and stuffs her into a wood chipper. Chris Robin is still alive, and Pooh and Piglet start to attack and kill off the group of girls. And if you're wondering, how are they doing this? Isn't Winnie the Pooh owned by Disney? Can't they get into legal trouble for this? Well, no, because it's based on the original A.A. Milne Winnie the Pooh book, which came out in 1926. After either 95 years of publication or 70 years after the death of the author, copyright just sort of goes away. It's not that simple, but basically after a certain point, anyone can use a work of art. As long as you don't make your movie similar to the versions of the character that came out after that, and solely use the inspiration of the work in the public domain, you're mostly okay. So, at this point in time, really anyone can make a film based on the 1926 A.A. Milne Winnie the Pooh book. So, Reese Frake Waterfield stepped up and said, okay, then I will. He had already made a couple of other low-budget horror flicks, such as The Killing Tree, about a killer Christmas tree, and produced quite a few more. It had a budget of around $100,000 and was pretty controversial when it came out, with Pooh fans sending them death threats and petitions to cancel the filming. It got enough online buzz that it was expanded to a small theatrical release and ended up bringing in around $5 million, making it a pretty solid success. However, it wasn't met with much enthusiasm from critics and viewers, which is why it's ending up here. On IMDb, it has a measly 2.9 out of 10, and on Letterboxd, it's hit a 1.3, giving a combined score of 4.2. And I have to say, honestly, it's not that bad. I mean, to be clear, it's not good either. It's too standard and bland for any of that. It comes off as a run-of-the-mill, generic slasher in the woods flick, and there's really no point for it to be Winnie the Pooh. It also takes itself far, far too seriously. I mean, it's called freaking Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, and then just goes for this whole grim, dark mood, and could have benefited from a touch of camp. But yeah, in terms of movies, it's not good at all. And in terms of this list, well, it's probably as good as we're going to get. And it's not the worst start to this whole round. And also, apparently was just shown in a classroom to a bunch of 4th graders. Number 9. This next one dropped down a bit, but we're still in the area where the numbers aren't too scary, and it's 5 Across the Eyes from 2006. If you're wondering what that title means, they tell you pretty early on, because it's a group of 5 high school girls that are driving home from a big game, and the area that they're in is called the eyes. But the expression is also a slang for a slap in the face, which is what this movie might end up feeling like. They get a bit lost and end up stopping at a nearby rest stop, and while goofing around, get into a fender bender and flee the scene. The car they hit ends up chasing them, eventually getting cornered by the driver, who has a shotgun and accuses them of destroying her family, forces them to remove all of their clothing, and pees on them. She lets them go, but then continues to chase and follow them, putting them through a series of torture, both physical and psychological, and has a trunk full of dead bodies. And what ensues is essentially a real-time survival tale, mostly set in the one car, and all taking place on the back roads, shot with mini DV cameras, with very minimal lighting, and definitely no tripod, and was shot on a very meager budget of $4,000. And the premise of this is actually really promising. I like things that play out in real time, and setting the whole thing in a limited location can lead to some fun ingenuity. But people really didn't take to it, seeing as it has a 2.6 on IMDb and a 1.5 on Letterboxd, giving it a combined score of 4.1, 1 point lower than Blood and Honey. And there's likely two reasons for that low rating. One of them is the quality of the filming. If you get motion sickness from too much shaky cam, you're going to want to stay far, far away from this one. It's like the cameraman could only function if he was also on a trampoline. But the second thing is the dialogue of the girls themselves, since they're in every single scene, and a majority of the runtime is their interplay. And get ready to hear them argue and bicker at each other for the entire time. It's like one of those Rob Zombie School of Conversation kind of movies. And I don't really hate this. It's not really difficult to watch. It's definitely worse than Blood and Honey. But again, in terms of things I've watched for this channel, it's not too rough. And so far, with this list, I'm getting off easy, I guess. Number 8. This next little number is from 2004, and it's Uli Lommell's Zombie Nation. Or, as the opening critics tell us, Zom, bye, nah, tie-on. We kick this off with a couple of cops, and one of them kidnaps people. But I love this. I guess the other cop doesn't know about it, and the bad cop takes her to this lab and comes back out carrying this big duffel bag that's full of something the size of a human body, and says,
"Where's the lady?"
Her? I let her go. Wrote her a ticket and let her.
And he buys it. Just kind of goes along with it, I guess. The lab is run by this woman in a wheelchair and a little kid, and there's a rather lengthy scene of a naked man being spanked with a cane. But Singer's partner finally starts to suspect something is up. He's just now suspecting that something is up, with his partner pulling over women for no reason, taking them to a strange warehouse, and then leaving them there and appearing with a large full duffel bag. He is just now saying that there may be something fishy going on there. But, oh no, all of the police are in on it. And this is like a half hour into the movie, and there hasn't been a single zombie in this movie called Zombie Nation. And we've only been in this limited location, so not really the nation. And look, both films before this one are from either first-time directors or ones with limited filmographies. But this is from Uli Lommell, who has been directing since the early 70s. He's the man who made the 1980 Boogeyman, so you'd expect some sort of competence. But yeah, you're just not getting it here. And this one pretty regularly shows up on worst horror movies ever lists, and even though its Letterboxd score isn't too terrible at a 2.4, the IMDb score is only a 1.5 out of 10. That gives it a combined score of 3.9. But here's where that whole new Letterboxd score system is wonky. If you manually add up the ratings it got, this film's overall score drops to 0.9. And that would have given it a score of only 2.4 combined. So I guess that Zombie Nation can thank their whole ranking revision for that. The zombies don't show up until almost an hour in, and this is them. Nice of them to apply fresh lipstick before going on the hunt. They're not even really zombies, since they look pretty normal and can even talk. And there's just a couple of them, far, far from a nation. And yeah, this is awful. But again, not painful. It's more boring than anything else, and certainly not a fun watch, and likely deserves such a low rating because Lommel really should have known better by this point, and has some of the weirdest music cues of all time.
I'm slowly going insane.
Number 7. Okay, here's where it goes wrong, I think, because this next one is a horror spoof, and it's, Breaking Wind from 2012. It starts with multiple fart and poop jokes.
Change me.
Marry me.
No, seriously, change me. I think I just soiled my pants.
And a grandma blowjob. And it's clear that this is a parody of the Twilight movies, and you'd think that I would say, hey, that's not really a horror film, so you're off the hook here. You don't have to watch this. But, well, I did not say that. I suppose that it follows the plot of Twilight Breaking Dawn, but I admit that I have never seen any of the Twilight movies, so I can't really say. But honestly, I would rather watch any of those than this. A movie that thinks that simply putting little people into a movie makes it funny. Like, there's no joke, it's just little people. Like, ha ha ha, isn't that funny? There's a small role for Danny Trejo, and just this general lack of anything humorous. They put a bunch of different Johnny Depp roles in the movie just to have them there. They don't make any jokes about them. It's just a reference. Like, look, you know who these characters are, right? And yeah, it's like that whole brand of mid-2000s spoof comedy, but in 2012, and was directed by Craig Moss, and was the second thing like this that he did, with the first one being the 41-year-old virgin who knocked up Sarah Marshall and felt super bad about it. Get it? It's the titles of all those other movies. He also wrote this, and would later go on to do the whole Badass series of movies that Danny Trejo starred in. And this movie may have had a 2.3 on IMDb, which is pretty low, but it also has a mere 1.4 on Letterboxd, giving us a pretty crappy 3.7 altogether. And this is the kind of movie that I don't mind hating.
Police are baffled by the escalating murders, disappearances, and how Brendan Fraser keeps getting work.
Like that right there. What the hell did Brendan Fraser do except be a solid actor appearing in some fun and some dumb movies? And meanwhile, they're like, Brendan Fraser keeps getting work and we don't think he's talented. But like, I'm looking at your talent level right here, buddies. And maybe you should offer to Windex someone's glass house and put your stones away. And hey, Craig Moss, writer of that joke, do you have an Oscar? Just curious, as Fraser does. But I also don't mind tearing this apart because it's clear that they had a budget. I don't think it was too high, but I guarantee it was over $1 million. And I honestly rather watch a backyard effort made for like $10K, and those films have more effort and heart anyway. And yeah, several times I've said on this channel that the ones I have the hardest times with are the comedies that fail. Way more than the horror that fails. And this is the textbook example. And I'm telling you right now, this is number 7 on this list, but numbers 1 through 6 are going to have to work damn, and I mean damn hard to be worse than this. Number 6. Let's see if we can get rougher than that, because we're now moving on to 2014's Carnival Creepshow. And you know what makes me nervous? When I go to IMDb and the cast list doesn't have a single picture posted. You see, for them to have your picture on there, you actually have to pay for IMDb Pro. And most actors do that because, you know, you want to know what they look like. If there's no pictures of anyone at all, it's likely because none of the actors are really in the industry or are looking to continue on. It doesn't always mean that they'll all be terrible, but it's just not a good sign. We have a group of young folk on a trip to see a band play, and I love that the camera was just in the car with them, and clearly no one had a wide-angle lens, so it's just like someone sitting in one of the other seats and filming the others. On the way, they see signs for the Carnival Creep Show, so they decide to stop. And it's very much active, with an old woman who is obviously just someone in a mask. And it's kind of more of a haunted house, and they're knocked out and then subjected to a series of terrible torture by a group of wacky inhabitants of the Carnival. But then, for whatever reason, there's just this other gang of people, and they're also in the creep show and get attacked as well. And I don't know, there's really no plot here. It's just people getting subjected to people attacking them. And it's very clear that this was influenced by the films of Rob Zombie. At times, it's like they're trying to do a tribute to A House of a Thousand Corpses, what with the colors and carnival nature of the characters, and the way that one of the women clowns talks sounds like she's trying to emulate Sherry Moon Zombie, as if that's a solid career choice. And it was directed by Joshua Miller. And it's his second feature, with the first being something called The Cook. But I guess he's also involved in the special effects world and does work on some bigger features. And the oddest note on his filmography is doing special effects work on the Oscar-winning film Minari. But let me tell you, Carnival Creepshow is no Minari. Hell, it's not even Minions. And yeah, it's pretty hard to get through because it's mostly just a random assortment of scenes. No story, no real characters to follow. Not much of anything except people shouting and acting crazy. It's only got a 1.5 on IMDb and a 1.6 on Letterboxd, ranking it at a 3.1. And damn, we've really dropped from 3.7 to 3.1. And yeah, this probably deserves the low score, and I'm now worried about what's to come. Number 5. I feel like one of these bottom-of-the-barrel horror lists wouldn't be complete without a terrible shark movie, and there's one down here since it's time for 2014's 90210 Shark Attack. Of course, that zip code is for the Beverly Hills area, and that's where we're set. Although this beach shot, I'm guessing, is stock footage, because it sure ain't off the coast of Los Angeles. This does not look like this. A group of young, pretty people are renting a big, fancy house, and we're then treated to a rather lengthy scene of Denny here taking a swim and toweling off, making sure to give us some really long looks at his abs, because yep, this is another film by David Duchovny, just like Bigfoot vs. D.B. Cooper that I previously featured. And a good portion of his films are always beefcake-based. Then Donna Wilkes walks in, and she knows a thing or two about facing down a shark attack. And whoa, she took a solid 20-year break from acting, from 1991 to 2013, only to come out of retirement to do 2 Dakota flicks, and then go away again for another 6 years because she was possibly traumatized. They're doing a class project, and when Alyssa's dad is brought up, who recently passed away, she gets sad, and this is how she storms out. We're told that her dad ripped off a Lost Tribes shark amulet and her family is cursed. And just to get you up to speed, we're a half hour into this 1 hour and 10-minute movie, and not only have there been no shark attacks, but they haven't even left the house. Then, of course, it's time for Denny to take a shower, and then finally at around 44 minutes, something finally happens. But it's this. And here's what's silly. This is a shark attack movie, and some of them go on a boat trip. So you're like, okay, here come the sharks. But no, they don't actually show the boat trip. Like, they show a boat, one that I'm assuming is stock footage since you can't actually see the actors on it, and then cut to them coming back home saying, oh, that was fun. And yeah, clearly this is some false advertising of the highest degree, considering that this is the box art. And nothing like this even remotely like this. Anything like this happens here. It's literally just people in a house for 70 minutes and a haunted shark amulet that lets a girl transform her head into a shark head and eat them. That's probably why people rated it so low, since it's sitting at a 1.2 on Letterboxd and a 1.6 on IMDb, making it a total of 2.8. Our first film on this list to hit under a combined 3. Number 4. This next one is giving me bad vibes from the title alone because it's 2012's Fetish Dolls Die Laughing. and begins with a woman being attacked by a man jumping out of a tree, a small tree. Like, how on earth did she not see him up here before this? But he's not a slasher of the classic variety. No, this guy is the tickle monster, and I guess he tickles you to death. And the tale of the dude is told to this little kid who grows up and is with a cop. And there's also a killer on the loose who's targeting bridesmaids. But it looks like the tickle monster is still in action, taking over the body of this guy and making him accidentally kill his wife. There's also this woman who I guess is not the maid of honor killer and is just a random other psychopath that they include for some reason. It's then several plots going on at once as they try to catch the maid of honor killer and the cops, who are literally discussing sex at every single conversation, and the tickle monster. And it's fairly bizarre and definitely aimed at foot lovers. Like, this is probably Quentin Tarantino's favorite film. And it's bad. It's super cheap and amateurish, but this really isn't difficult to get through. It's strange enough, and things move along quickly, although it does get a bit repetitive. And at an hour and 41 minutes, it's absolutely too long. But this is one that I'm not too mad at, although I guess other people were, since it only has a 1.1 on Letterboxd and a 1.7 on IMDb for a combined 2.8. The same score as 90210 Shark Attack, and let me tell you, this is far more entertaining than that one. It actually has a ton more effort. So again, this is another that I would definitely call a bad movie, and not one that I would recommend. But in terms of, oh, this is one of the worst movies you'll ever see? Yeah, well, it's really, really not. Number 3. This next one is from 2013, and it's Isis Rising, Curse of the Lady Mummy. And right off the bat, we meet Isis, and it's adult film star Priya Rai, just wearing body paint. We get a good idea why she doesn't get more mainstream work here.
He is now the ruler of the dead, and he shall rise up with an army of the undead to kill you, and all of the world of kingdoms who died against him.
And she's killed. We then jump to present day, and there's a group of college students in an archaeology class with the usual assortment of horror movie stereotype characters. They have this ancient tablet and are deciphering it, and of course, read it out loud. And that kicks off some supernatural stuff that I guess looks like this.
Robert!
And then Isis is restored, and it took us a half hour to get to this point. And let me tell you, not a lot happened in that 30 minutes. It's pretty dull. She takes over one of the students, and there's some very oddly placed music. And they're on the hunt for the Book of the Undead. And I'm not joking. They mention the Book of the Dead from the Brendan Fraser movies and talk about how that's real. And this is the Book of the Undead. And yeah, at the 45-minute mark, Isis really hasn't done anything except kill the one security guard. And keep in mind, this movie is only an hour and 19 minutes long. And I love that Isis's ancient costume features what appears to be modern bra straps. And what is this labyrinth they're in? I mean, they're acting like they're stuck there, but these walls are so very obviously foam board, just like punch through them. And in terms of how this is ranked, it only managed to scrape up a 1.8 on IMDb, which was a higher score than Fetish Dolls, but it topped out at a 0.7 on Letterboxd, which only gives it a total of 2.5. And yeah, I get it here. That is the combination that I kind of dread. It's super cheap and low budget, but just not fun. The plot is that of the standard run-of-the-mill sci-fi original, but with a lot shoddier production values, and none of that is really appealing. You keep wanting it to be sillier, or worse, or feel like the kind of movie that's all like, hey, our only actor with a recognizable name is a porn star. But it's mostly just people sitting around and talking, and yeah, it's a slog. I should also mention that it's directed by Lisa Palenica, who mostly works as a costume designer, but I guess sporadically directs and produces as well, But oddly enough, another of their films have been on one of these lists with Monster, the prehistoric project, and that was made after this one and only got a combined 2.2. So, interestingly, her score went down. Number 2. I got excited about this next one being on here and was prepared to be all like, hey, this doesn't belong here, because it's Sledgehammer. And I thought that they meant the silly shot-on-video film from the early 80s. But this one is from 2017 instead. It has this guy named Yolner, who has a pretty rough day, and then to make matters worse, his coworkers decide to play a prank and slip drugs into his coffee. This, for some reason, causes him to flip out and remember his love of Nordic warriors, and he takes the sledgehammer that he was meant to break up concrete with and kills his boss. It then jumps into a bunch of seemingly unconnected scenes that are shot in a surreal and frantic style with frenetic editing, weird green screen, and minor attempts at comedy. None of those are successful. It tries to be kind of artsy and take some chances, like after Yolner kills someone, the movie gives you this whole afterlife review segment where the person killed is interviewed about their death. But there's really no plot here. It's just introducing some characters, having them go through a skit of some sort, and then they're killed by Yoli's sledgehammer. And here's the scoop with this one. It is also by Joshua Miller, director of Carnival Creepshow. And I did not know that when I picked them. It's not like I chose both of these because they were on his filmography. I literally just scoured the bottom ranks of both of the sites to find these movies and didn't discover that I had two from Miller until I was in the research phase of things. And there's a handful of similarities in between the stylistic choices between the two. And this was the film he made right after Carnival Creepshow. But here's the thing. As this one went on, I didn't mind this at all. I'm not going to say that it was good, but it was entertaining here and there. It's a massive improvement from Carnival, even though there's still work to be done. But I think it's funny that this one ranks lower, considering it only has a 1 on Letterboxd and a 1.4 on IMDb, for a total of 2.4. And again, I don't want to hype you up to think that this is an unfairly maligned movie, because it has a ton of problems. But out of all the films I've featured on this list so far, if you forced me to rewatch one, this is the one I'm picking. Number 1. Let's see what's next. How low can we go? Well, this is pretty low, and it was recommended as one of the worst movies ever from a man who I know has seen some terrible films, Mr. Meathook. And it's Hop Locos. And wow, the dialogue in this. In keeping in line with the YouTube censors, I can't play you any of it because every other word is a curse word. And every other word is Holmes. I'm not kidding. The word Holmes is spoken so many times, I wanted to keep count because I thought that might be a funny bit. But after 10 minutes, I reached like 120 and lost interest and wanted to keep my sanity. I should point out that almost as frequent is the word essay. But like, there's these two guys who are hip-hop artists and they decide to kill drug dealers and steal their money in order to fund their music. The first 13 minutes of this movie is basically them sitting in a car talking to one and then choking him to death. And I'm not exaggerating. They choke him for over 2 minutes. A full 120 seconds of them just choking a guy with one of them saying, "Choke him, Holmes," over and over and over again. Then there's another meetup, and this is how it's filmed. And this is a sampling of their music.
The first thing we did is we carjacked the Fool, took the Impala to move on to the new school, and then we went into our first jack.
So yeah, I'm not sure that the money is the reason they're not hitting it big. And I'm not joking that this is literally all that this one is. It's just them riding from dealer to kill them and rip them off. And in the in-between bits, they're just sitting in their dark car spouting off improvised dialogue that doesn't make any sense and is repetitive as possible, with about 75% of it filmed in ultra close-up. It was directed by Lorenzo Munoz Jr., and before this, he did a couple of Faces of Death-style death compilations and a movie called Barrio Boys, but this appears to be his last work in the industry whatsoever. And this is pretty hard to get through, which is why it only has a meager 0.9 on Letterboxd and a lowly 1.1 on IMDb, giving it a total score of only a 2 out of 15. And this truly deserves to be the lowest ranking film on this list, and is quite possibly one of the worst things I've had to watch for this channel. Although I have to say, it's not really a horror film, it's more of a crime thing than anything else, but both Letterboxd and IMDb call it horror, so I guess it qualifies. So there you have it. According to Letterboxd and IMDb, those are 10 of the worst movies that you could possibly watch, and there's varying degrees of terrible in there. A couple of them I didn't think were that bad, and some of them were just gut-wrenchingly painful to watch. Hop Locos is absolutely the worst one on this list, with Breaking Wind a very close second. I don't know which one of the two I would watch again if I was forced to pick between the two. Probably Hop Locos because it's shorter. I don't know. If you've seen any of these, tell me down below in the comments. If you know more movies that you think are even worse, I want to hear those down below in the comments. Let me know what are the worst horror movies that you can think of, and we'll see what they add up to on those sites. And we'll see if we can find the ones that are worse. But yeah, I hope everyone enjoyed the video. I hope you're enjoying your holiday today. If you're in the US, enjoy that. Please like the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you have not already, and check out my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines. Appreciate that. In the meantime, I'll see you very shortly for another great video. Happy holiday. Bye-bye.